I feel like what activated me, just, the things that are going on politically, socially, that are tied to my identity as a black male, and just seeing what's going on. I felt like, having a platform where I can just express myself. And I like to do poetry as well. That's something I forgot to mention about myself, but I love poetry. And that allows me, an outlet that allows me to express myself creatively, artistically. And as Nina Simone said, um, an artist's duty is to reflect the times, right? Reflect the time
Mhm.
in which we live in. So I felt that necessary, that taking in criminalization, brutalization, the marginalization, and the commercialization of Black bodies and people of color to kind of use my art of poetry, writing, and also podcasting to speak to social justice and these enduring issues. When I did that first episode, I was thinking, hey, these are different topics I could talk about for mental health. Maybe I could talk about neurodiversity, which I want to probably discover in, a newer episode or whatnot, and just different topics I could talk about and relate to. And at that time, I was struggling a little bit with my mental health and I wanted to kind of unpack it also to like driving in my personal experience because I feel that like comics in a way, yeah, they're fictional or whatnot, but they're also relatable. You have I don't know if you've seen The Boys, but The Boys, is political, talking about our current politics right now and our current state of affairs with that. The X-Men has always been political. But I hate when people say, oh, comics are woke or always been like, comics have always been woke.
Mhm.
Comics have always been
Mhm.
personal, political, emotional, social. They've always been that way. The X-Men, for example, my favorite superhero team, have always been an allegory for racial relation, discrimination, bigotry. They've always been like that. Always been like that. And that's what I don't like when people say that. Superman, for example, and everybody's like, oh, Superman would be conservative and Superman, oh, wouldn't support what's going on right now with like, immigration policies and racism. Like, he would support it. And I'm like, he wouldn't. And there's different panels, examples that show that, he himself, if we're being real, Superman himself is an immigrant. It's from a different planet. And saying that he would be, he would greenlight what's going on now with the ICE raids and our current state of politics. It's just like, really, you're not a comic book fan. You're not a fan of the character. Not knowing what his core intention and inherent values are. Going back to The Boys with Homelander, he is the embodiment from down to his appearance, blonde hair, blue eyes. And from his core values, he is the inherent definition of what white supremacy represents. You know, when you had him literally being in a relationship with Stormfront, I'm like, and then people are just realizing that now when you didn't realize it back then, literally. And I'm like, okay, I feel like comics have always been a modern mythology. I use those as a frame to look through real world issues or just different themes, messages, and I use it to encode it. We all have stories to tell, no matter, what they are. And, I want to tell a story through something that I love. That was kind of my inspiration for the mask we wear and how it started. I kind of came up with the name and then thought to include the poem Bipolar Lawrence Dunbar. I feel like as a society, we all wear masks to survive, to heal, to hide, to laugh. And I think that's what inspired me, just thinking of that, like that concept. And then, and it, like to connect the dots, the poem Bipolar Lawrence Dunbar kind of solidify that and like listening and reciting that poem kind of has some meaning to me. And I could definitely relate to that. I'm sure everybody can from what he was saying.